Chris Singleton, welcome to the Inside Out Leadership Podcast, my friend.
What's going on, man? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you know how much I've been looking forward to this conversation because you and I may have more in common than we even realize. We're both out there speaking, sharing our message, sharing our heart. We're both former professional athletes. We'll get to that. But I thought a really good place to start, but yet a challenging place to start is really at the heart of your story. Would you be willing to share about the tragic incident that took place in Charleston, South Carolina at your church a handful of years ago?
Absolutely, man. And as tough as it is, I feel like for me, it's a way to keep my mom's memory alive and the other victims of my church family that we lost. So the incident that you're speaking about is June 17, 2015. Unfortunately, there was a guy who wanted to start a race war in this country. He's a young guy, man. And what he did was he walked into my church and sat there for about an hour 15 minutes, and ultimately he took 9 lives that night. And
Hmm.
his morals was, hey, if I do this, maybe I can start a race war in the country. Like that's what his motive was. And unfortunately, I always say that battle was lost because my mom is no longer here,
Hmm.
but the war, I feel like, is being won with people like me, like yourself, that's out here just pushing hope and trying to bring people closer together. Lost my mom that night, man, my hero, in my family. She was a priest, provider, protector. And since that day, I've just been having this thought process of everything that I do. I want to make sure I don't let my mom down.
And you're not, man. Since I learned of your story, learned of you, I couldn't help but think what a proud mom she is right now. And just with you speaking, you sharing, you catching people on fire with truth, because one of the things you oftentimes say is love is stronger than hate. And Chris, I want to go into that just a little bit more. When you did hear about the news, I don't know where you were. Maybe you could take us into where you were when you first heard the news and when you heard that your mom was one of the victims. Like, where were you? What was going through your heart, your mind when you heard that tragic news?
Yeah, man, I was only 18, had a baseball game, and it was a Wednesday night, and I started playing my game, get a call on my cell phone, and saw my mom's name on it, but realized really quickly that it wasn't my mom that was calling me. Rushed down to my church, and when I got down there, I realized something tragic had happened. Uh, so I got down there. There's an officer outside of my church doing his job, basically not letting anybody in. And finally, I said to the guy, like, what am I supposed to be doing here, right? Because in that situation, like, I'm just nervous and I'm scared. I don't know what's going on. I just know that somebody called me from my mom's phone. It's not my mom. And there's a bunch of blue lights out there with the cops and the ambulances and all that stuff. And I'm nervous. And later on throughout that night, man, I remember just certain instances where I just could never imagine something like this was happening to me. And you hear people say how stuff is surreal. And, the other day I was just honestly thinking, when I lost my mom, people talk about, like, once you get shot, like, you don't know that you got shot. You just go,
Yeah.
right? You don't know anything. I was in so much shock that I lost my mom that night, but didn't even realize the magnitude of what happened to my family. And, later on that night, I was told that my mom was a victim of the murder and or victim of the shooting. And, I had to tell my little brother and little sister that mom was gone. And, anybody that has to experience something like that knows how tough that is, especially with me knowing, hey, now I got to step up and be that father figure for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, you said that you were shocked and you went, I'm sure by default, you started taking care of your siblings. Had to share the tragic news with them. What was it like? That was the beginning of a process for you, I imagine. You go from shock. I oftentimes will talk about grief, the importance of grieving. One day, you're complete shock. The next, you're angry, frustrated, whatever the case may be. And it's a process. It's a journey for people that go through any kind of grieving. What was that grieving process like for you?
Man, it was tough. I think that, initially I didn't really show any emotion. I made that mistake, man. Honestly, Rob, like, I made the mistake of pretending like everything was okay,
Hmm.
even though I knew it wasn't. right? And so I was on I was on ESPN E60. I was on the Today Show. I did like a bunch of stuff on like CNN and Fox. So there's this massive press run of just, hey, this young guy who's trying to unite people after losing his mom, right? That was the headlines and things of that nature. But I didn't really give myself time to sift through what I was going through. My losing my mom, like all I could think about was, how do I take care of my brother and sister? And I realized I messed up because for a while I never cried in front of anybody. Like people just said, Chris, you're so strong. I didn't know what that meant. So
Mm,
I didn't know if I should cry or if I should show that emotion. But about a year and a half later, unfortunately, I lost my father. And in that moment, I kind of let everything out. And
mm.
once I let everything out, I realized, hey, keeping this in, pretending like you're okay all the time isn't helping anybody out. It's just showing your brother and sister that they can't grieve. And so I finally let out my emotions and I really started that process of healing from the stuff that I'd gone through.
A couple things jump out to me in that. So thank you for your vulnerability in that, because as you and I both know, when you are transparent and you're vulnerable, that's tremendous strength. There's no doubt about it. And you're modeling that really well today in this conversation. So to go back though, when you did hear that news and you had this response, the response of, I got to take care of my brother, my sister, I got to take care of my siblings. But the message, there's a reason why the Today Show had you on ESPN, because they saw this young man that was responding out of a place that, quite frankly, Chris, and you know this, just the average person just doesn't respond out of that place. Like you were responding out of a place. Didn't mean you were hurt. You were hurt. You were grieving. You were all these, but yet at the same time, you said love is greater than hate. And there was something in you that in that moment, you started to take a higher road. You had a higher perspective. And everyone couldn't help but take notice, because who rolls like that? So for you, where's that come from? Like, even to have a default mechanism. And again, I appreciate you sharing, like, hey, a year and a half later, your mom had already passed away, your dad passed away, and then all the emotions started to come. But in that moment where you hear news like that, so many, they put up their guard to almost like an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But you didn't. And it was a message of hope, love, and unity. Where's that come from?
Yeah, man, I think initially I had no idea where it was coming from. I felt like it was something out of this world. And me being a person of faith, I still believed like it was placed on my heart to forgive my mother's killer because, Rob, if you'd have told me, hey, Chris, you're going to forgive your mother's killer for taking her life because she's black, I would have said, get out of my face. You're crazy. There's
Mm,
no way in the world this will ever happen. But I did. And I said, love is stronger than hate. And looking back, I know why I did now, because now I figured out, hey, by me saying that, by some of my other church family forgiving, like it brought us closer together, and his goal was not accomplished. And I think that's super important
mm,
because it would have been super easy for us to say, hey, this happened. Now I hate all white people. And
mhm.
by me hating all white people, his job, his goal is completed. And I think that looking back on it now, I understand why I kind of had that thought process. But when I'm in the midst of the storm, man, it's just reactionary.
Mm.
Maybe it was the stuff that my mom instilled into me. Maybe it was my faith that came into play. All that I know is now, man, I'm so grateful that uh, my city locked arms. People didn't say like, "Hey, I wonder what happened before," or "What happened." No, they just said, "Hey, let's support the people that lost their loved ones in Charleston because we're all against this evil together." And I'm grateful things went that way.
Yeah. And I am too, man, because the ripple effect throughout the last 7+ years has been absolutely unbelievable. Um, so I wanted to first, just on a personal note, I wanted to say how sorry I am. Um, your story just rocked me. And I'm so sorry that you and your family had to go through that. Your mom had to go through it and experience what she experienced. My heart not only dropped, but it definitely goes out to you. And then of course, a year and a half later, um, helping you further process that situation, your father passes away. So my deepest condolences and my continual prayers go out to you and your family.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So here you go. And, I take away, it's like, okay, you were resilient almost immediately. and trying to even figure out the reasons why. You've given obviously your faith and some things your mom instilled in you and just how God's made you. So you were resilient right from the get-go, had this higher thought, this higher perspective that brought people together for a greater good. No doubt about it. That's without question. But then you fast forward and your heart starts, in a sense, starts to soften even more as you begin to grieve, as you begin to unpack what had happened with your mom, your dad's passing. So coupled with that resilience now is the power of grieving, a softened heart, offering forgiveness. So now, years later, after your mom's passed, your dad's passed, and you're traveling around the world with your message, and you take with you as a tremendous gift, both resilience as well as the power of grieving in a sense, right? And letting go so you can grab a hold of something greater. Would you say that now at your age, doing what you're doing, that your message has never been more clear, has never been stronger, and the effect has never been greater?
Yeah, man. And Rob, honestly, I used to just study people that are resilient. I used to just study it. I would just think to myself, how in the world do people get through the toughest things? Like, how do they? I know a lot of people go through them, but not everybody's able to be on the other side of it and, allow it to strengthen them, right? Some people, I say, some kids in life, they're thrown into the deep end and you got to sink or swim. And there's some kids that are sinking. It's drugs, it's alcohol, it's gangs, it's whatever it may be to cope with the pain they're going through.
Hmm.
Some people have a great childhood, and all of a sudden addiction is thrown into that's when they're thrown into the deep end. And so for me, I just study people. How do they get through it? And over and over and over again, people that had the thought process of, okay, this happened to me. Yes, it sucks, but how can I grow from this? How can this make me a better human being? How can I serve people based on what I've gone through, what I've gotten through? Those people are the people that actually get through it and live their lives and can still smile afterwards. And
Hmm.
that's what I studied. And for me, I think the message is super clear now. I feel like I've been put on this earth to spread a message of unity, of resilience, and share that with the masses. And opportunities have come left and right, and I'm grateful that I get them because I get to do what I feel like I'm called to do.
Mhm. Boy, that's so good. So, so good. So I got to backtrack way back. I need to meet Chris Singleton, the child, man. I mean, what kind of a kid were you? You go way back 5, 10 years old. Were you happy go lucky? Were you an extrovert and love people? Were you more of an introvert and you like to keep to yourself? Because I find the one thing is our story, and there's certain climax in our story, how we overcame and stuff like that. But I think if we even take a closer look into the person that we are truly created to be, um, based on maybe how we were knit together, our personality, how we were shaped at a young age, that also contributes to how we're shaped and the message that we have today. So take me back to Chris as a young kid, man. What were you like?
Yeah, man, I love that because I just finished a book, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and phenomenal book. And he's talking about what made us successful or what helped us get to where we're at. It's basically saying nobody's self-made. There's people along the way that helped you and groomed you. And I had two parents that were both athletes, man. So sports was huge when I was growing up. Dad played college football. My mom ran college track. So I
Woo.
grew up and I love sports, man. I played everything: football, basketball, baseball. And I never played soccer. My wife's from Brazil, so she always gives me crap about that, not playing soccer.
I
But
love it.
love sports, man. And I grew up just wanting to be an athlete. Grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I would say I was more of an extrovert. But I'm also an introvert today. Like I travel a lot by myself, and so I can go to movies by myself. I can go,
Mhm.
have dinner by myself and FaceTime my kids or whatever. Like I feel comfortable doing that. So I think I'm both. But as a kid, I hung out and laughed around. My dad was a super funny guy. He's always making jokes, right? That was my dad, and so I think I'm kind of that way with my brother and sister today. But I think that was the kind of childhood that I had. My dad was a good dad. He struggled with alcohol big time, right? That was one of the things he really struggled with. But growing up, man, I middle class family. I didn't really, have a lot, but I didn't really want for anything. And so things were good in my life, and I thought, me making it to the big leagues was going to be the big break for my family. But unfortunately, my mom and dad, they didn't get to see me get drafted, unfortunately.
Wow. And take us into that just a little bit. Speak for a moment about being drafted. Obviously you played multiple sports. You landed on baseball, which that's interesting all within itself. I'm like, I bet you were pretty good at multiple sports. So why would it be landing on baseball? But who knows? You might say, hey, I was pretty good at all of them, but baseball, there's no doubt that was my game. So take us into that a little bit. Why baseball as opposed to all the others? And what was it like playing pro baseball until the day you finally hung up your cleats?
Yeah, man. I think, first to our listeners that are listening, I don't know if you can tell by my voice, you never know, but I am an African American male. And being a black male, like there's not a ton of kids that look like me playing baseball. But in Atlanta, where I was born and where I grew up, man, we had all black teams. And my best friend as a kid, I mean, I was over his house every weekend. He was over my house every weekend. Summer camps together. His name was TJ Card, Tim Card, and we both played baseball. And this is my best friend. He loved baseball more than everything else. And so just being my best friend, I'm like, okay, well, I love baseball more than everything else. And we played all the sports together, but baseball was our thing we did all summer long. And when I moved away, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina. I just stuck with the sport that I played the most.
Yeah.
Basketball still played, and I still love basketball to this day. But my heart was really in baseball, and I devoted my energy. My summers were baseball, and that's kind of what grew me to play in college. And then my junior year is the year that I got drafted, and my sophomore year was phenomenal. After losing my mom, I just focused on nothing else but just playing my sport and loving my brother and sister. I didn't care about anything else in the world. But I just played my sport and I trained every single day. I outworked everybody. And by my junior year, I was on probably every single draft board. I shouldn't say every, probably 15 of the MLB draft boards I was on. And I was supposed to go between the fifth and 10th rounds. But unfortunately, I lose my father. All this stuff goes on. And so I didn't have the best start to my junior season, but I finished really, really strong. And the Cubs said, man, Chris, we love you. We love your game. And we want you to be a Cub. And that's when I got drafted, man. I played in the minor leagues. I was grinding it out and played a couple years. It was a grind, man. I think I hit like career hit low 200, maybe 220 something, maybe 230 career hitter. So I didn't hit very well. Hit some home runs here and there, stole some bases here and there. But ultimately, there was a guy behind me, man. They gave him $3.5 million. He's in the big leagues right now, Christopher Morel.
Woo.
And he was next. He was the next up. And they
Yeah.
said, Chris, can't move you up, man. We can't keep you down. So we could send you rookie ball or give you release papers. And I said, man, I'll take my release papers and go share this message that I have because I
There
was
you go.
already doing it in the off season. So it was a smooth transition for me, man. I knew what I was doing next. And a lot of athletes, we don't know what we're doing next, but I was grateful that I had something that I loved outside of my sport.
Man, that's so good to hear. And like I said, before I've hit the record button for this, you and I were talking a little bit, and I whet everyone's appetite at the beginning, like we have a lot more in common than we even realized. But I did share with you how I played 7 years of pro basketball. I played in the Atlantic Basketball Association, United Basketball Alliance, Eastern Basketball Alliance, and just thrilled as a small college basketball player to play with guys in the professional level that I used to watch on TV. And that was just absolutely amazing. So just to even hear your story, backdrop of your story, man, it's just it's inspirational to say the least. So thanks, Chris, for that.
For
Um,
sure, man. That's cool.
so Chris, you got to share with me. You got a book called Different, right?
I
So
do.
come on, you got to take us into the book. What I love that title, by the way, and the cover is just awesome. So take us into the book. When was it written? And how's it going? Being an author and obviously speaking not only your message, but even releasing of a book.
Yeah, man. Rob, I wouldn't call it uh arrogance. I used to have ignorance thinking that I could speak to every single school in the country is what I used to think, man. I didn't realize how many schools there are. So I said, okay, I can't get to every single school. Number one, I'm married and my wife, we have a rule where I'm not gone longer than 150 days out of the year. We set that rule. And so I said, I can't get to every school, nor do I want to. So what else can I do to get my message out there? And me and my little sister were talking, and ultimately we came up with the idea of writing a children's book. I had no idea what I was doing, Rob. I had no clue, but I asked a million people a million questions, and I wrote the story. My editor's like, Chris, that's way too long to be a children's book. We got to cut it down. We cut it down to 32 pages, man. We released it, and I self-published my first book. I've written other books since then and have a traditional publisher behind me. But that book did the best out of all of them.
Hmm.
I had a goal of selling 1,000 copies. Today, we've sold probably 43,000 copies of the book
That's great.
over the last 2 years. It's only been out for 2 years. And so things have gone really well with that children's book. The Obama Foundation got it. They shared it everywhere. Viola Davis, who's won Grammys, she's
Oh
won an
yeah.
Oscar. She shared her social platforms. And yeah, people have just supported it big time, and it's doing pretty well.
Good. It's good to hear. And of course, you have Your Life Matters as well as Baseball World, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, man. Those are my other children's books that I've written. And then I'm excited. My next book is releasing 2023, June 17th, 2023. And this one is actually going to be the 8-year anniversary of remembering when I lost my mom. And
Mm.
this book that I'm releasing is my first adult book.
Mm.
And I'm still torn between some titles, but essentially it's about this message of unity and resilience that I always speak about.
Yeah, I love it, man. You are doing your thing. Mom would be proud. Dad would be proud. And I know so many people around the globe are not only proud, but they are deeply inspired, influenced, and impacted by you and your message, Chris. So I appreciate that. So if you had one more kind of a leave behind or word of wisdom as it relates to turning tragedy into triumph, what would you leave behind with the audience?
Oh man, there's two things I want to leave behind. First and foremost, I think we have to do something to remember our loved ones that we lose, right? Whether it's a 5K in their honor, whether it's a foundation, whether it's, just living the right. We have to do something to say, hey, I remember this person by doing this. And when people have a purpose for their pain, those are the people that can get through it and they can give back to people that are going through it. So number one, have a purpose for your pain. And number two, I think once everybody realizes that as much as we think we cannot control what happens to us. We can only control our response. And we focus on those responses instead of what happens to us, things will happen for us in life. And although we go through tragedy, trials, and tribulations, we'll say, you know what, man, this is making me stronger and I won't fold because of it.
That's a good word. And that couldn't be any more timely, too. I think with everyone, with what they're going through, with the added stresses of COVID, now coming out of it, of course, as well as family issues, problems, challenges, and professional ones, Chris. I don't know if you've ever been considered a prophet, but I'll tell you, man, you got a word for this day and age that we all need to not only hear, but apply for sure. So, hey, where can we find out more about you? Because I know we got tons of leaders listening to this and like, hey, I need to get in touch with Chris. I need to invite him to either my school, my business, whatever. But so where can people find you?
Yeah, man. My website, chrissingleton.com, is where people get in touch with me. My social medias, I got every single social media, C Singleton _2. But yeah, chrissingleton.com is how people bring me in and speak. And I would love to partner with anybody that wants to do so.
Chris, you're a tremendous gift. Appreciate your conversation with me today because I know you are out and about, ready to speak tonight virtually. You got something live tomorrow. So just taking the time out of your busy schedule to spend with me and to spend with us, greatly, greatly appreciate it. Take behind for me something that you've left me with today that I'm going to ponder, I'm going to think about, I'm going to pray about is what does it look like to have a heart of resilience at the same time allowing yourself to grieve? And when you begin to hold those two close to you, because sometimes we take a look and it's like, hey, I'm either going to be resilient or I'm going to be soft and grieve. But I think both can be held together and taken in closely. And I believe when you begin to do that with the help of others, all of a sudden now you begin to find a strength deep within and around that you'd never have otherwise. So Chris Singleton, thank you, thank you, thank you. I look forward to continue the conversation. There's no doubt about it. And the next time that we cross paths, traveling, speaking, man, we got to hit up a meal. We got to go out and grab some food.
Absolutely, my man.
Hey,
I'll be up your way soon. We'll talk soon.
sounds good. Blessings. Bye.